Good afternoon, I'm Karen Holmes Ward. Welcome to Cityline. Due to academic setbacks brought on by the pandemic, the Boston Public School Committee voted unanimously in October of 2020 to suspend the exam portion of the admissions process to the 3 Boston exam schools. Instead, the committee implemented a new zip code-based admission system, allowing for 20% of open seats to be reserved for top-ranking students based on their grade point average or GPA, and the remaining 80% of available seats to be distributed based on a combination of zip code and GPA, with neighborhoods with the lowest median incomes receiving priority in the selection process. According to the school committee, the new admission system is an effort to improve the socioeconomic, racial, and geographic diversity of the student body at Boston's 3 exam schools. While the zip code admission system has already been used for 1 exam school admissions process, but what will be the exam school admissions criteria in post-pandemic Boston? Let's hear from some former BPS students, one from Dorchester, another from Mattapan, who shared their successful achievement-based experience getting into Boston exam schools.
My dad had always instilled the value of education and the importance of prioritizing education. He would always, say things like, you work hard now and you'll have fun later.
Meet Aya Fedouar, a promising young grad student at MIT. After receiving his bachelor's degree in public policy from Brown University, Aya is currently receiving a dual degree from MIT in city planning as well as an MBA.
Since we were very young, me and my siblings, my dad had us in summer school at home. He would give us his college textbooks, so we were always kind of preparing for whatever it was.
Aya attributes his academic success to Father Josiah Fedouar, who from a young age pushed his son to excel in academics.
Education is the simplest way, the easiest way for you to get into the world as somebody that drives your own boat.
Aya is a chip off the old block. His father also holds advanced degrees in agriculture, business, electronics, and computer engineering. Josiah remembers raising his 5 children in Boston and from a very young age instilling in them the value of education.
We live in neighborhoods that are not so great, Roxbury, Dorchester. So it's the best way to get your kids out of trouble. You keep them busy in a positive way, So we used to go out to South Boston, and there's a playground there. When we played it enough, we come back home, and then we get to study, and they liked it.
With all the home preparation, it's no surprise that Aya did exceptionally well on his entrance exams, so well that he could pick from any exam school in the city. But like many young black students in Boston public schools, Aya chose not to attend the predominantly white Boston Latin School.
I knew that Boston Latin School was predominantly white, predominantly Asian, and wasn't a very diverse teaching staff, at least what I perceived at the time. So for me, I knew that I would thrive more at a place like O'Brien, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
Of course, not all black exam school students in Boston have the same experience.
I didn't know about exam schools prior to taking the test, or maybe not even until after I took the test.
Meet Brianna Bourne, a first-generation college student who graduated from Boston Latin Academy and is in her 2nd year at Boston University, where she studies psychology and Latin classical civilization.
My parents just said, okay, you're going to take the exam.
Brianna had very little, if any, prep for the entrance exam, and neither of her parents went to college.
I didn't learn until later that there was prep specifically for this test. I found that really surprising because I was just thrown into it.
Brianna also recalls not having strong opinions about which school she would attend.
I know my parents chose the school for me. Even at that time, I wasn't really sure what was happening. Like, they chose my elementary school, they chose my middle school, so they're just choosing my high school again. That was my logic.
Even though Brianna had a different experience preparing for the exam and choosing her school, she does share a similar sentiment with Aya when it comes to the reputations of the exam schools.
Boston Latin School might have more white students because of the location. I feel like that is a very big factor. I'm from Mattapan. Boston Latin Academy is in Roxbury, and O'Brien is very close to that.
After our interview with Brianna, we didn't have to travel too far to find someone who could better explain the wide racial gap which exists in Boston exam schools.
I think the reason that the exam schools don't reflect the diversity of the Boston student community is a combination of two things.
BU professor Joshua Goodman from the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development.
The exam schools' admissions processes have had historically sort of challenging academic standards as a condition of admission. But there's another thing going on, which is there's a set of high-achieving, well-prepared Black and Hispanic students in Boston who, for whatever reason, do not apply to the exam schools or don't end up enrolling in them.
In 2018, Professor Goodman co-authored an academic study titled Racial Diversity and Measuring Merit, Evidence from Boston's Exam School Admissions.
It can be a complicated or intimidating process. Some of it may be the fact that those schools historically have not had great reputations in terms of supporting Black and Latinx students, and so the students themselves may not find those environments appealing.
Professor Goodman goes on to explain the alternative school of thought when it comes to admissions policies for exam schools.
And you have a set of people who say, well, no, maybe that's not the right way to do things because, for example, the set of students who teach themselves algebra, which is not part of the sort of typical curriculum in, for example, the Boston Public Schools, that's really identifying students whose families have been helping them out of school to learn things. And that's not the same as identifying students who, if given a certain set of resources and curricula and teachers of good quality, would excel.
Drawing on his experience on the issue, he also offers an explanation as to why the Boston School Committee may have suspended the exam for a zip code and GPA-based admissions system.
They saw it as a more effective way of identifying students with potential. In other words, students who were doing the best given the environment that they were growing up in and the schools that they were attending. And so I think this was the Boston School Committee's way of, in some sense, shifting the definition of what was being identified to deem someone good for admission to the exam schools.
But what effect will this new zip code-based admission system have on the way these schools currently operate? Will eliminating the exam lower the academic standards at these schools, as some opponents to the new plan argue?
I come back to this topic of algebra because it's a great example of something that was on the admissions test for many years, but it's not part of the school curriculum. And so the math teachers at the exam schools historically could expect that kids coming in had been exposed to algebra and those ideas, and so they could sort of start the curriculum knowing that. That is probably not going to be the case going forward. And so the teachers are going to have to adapt to that.
And finally, Professor Goodman offers up perhaps the best argument for an effort to further diversify Boston's exam schools.
We have a growing body of evidence that when white and higher income students are exposed to a more diverse set of peers in their schools, they themselves are more likely to exhibit tolerant attitudes, to be less racist, to be less prejudiced. And we have recent evidence, at least, that going to more diverse high schools for white students tends to make them more politically tolerant in terms of their voting behavior and political affiliations.
And when we return, we're going to hear from the opposition to the zip code-based system and why this group believes that eliminating the exam portion of the admissions process will result in a dip in the academic standards of the 3 Boston exam schools.